It's time for Comeback Sports with Brandon, the Coach Perry, and Pat, the Shot Caller Flaherty. Here we go.
Happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Comeback Sports, a weekly sports talk show between myself, Pat the Shot Caller Flaherty, and my co-host, Brandon the Coach Perry. We talk about 10 sports topics that are happening across the nation, across the globe, and we want to hear from you too, folks, on this Comeback Sports weekly talk show. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, we have our Twitter handles right at the bottom there, so make sure you follow Brandon and myself on Twitter. You can also follow Comeback Sports on YouTube. If you like this show, you like what we're talking about, go to YouTube, give us a subscription on Comeback Sports. All this content that we are pushing out for you will be fed right to your YouTube channel. And then finally, we have a number at the bottom of the screen. You can call into the show at that number and actually ask us a question, leave a voicemail. Do whatever you want. We'll answer that question. We'll have you on the show, or we'll play the voicemail back, and then we can talk about whatever you want to talk about that's happening in the world of sports. Coach Perry, what is happening, my friend, buddy? How we doing?
I'm doing great. What's up, Pat? I want to give a big shout out to you, of course, for leading the show, and then a big shout out to our producer, Ben Kudo, behind the scenes. We need to give him all the love. He deserves it. He's the man running the scenes here, running the show, the captain of this boat, per se. And then I also want to give a big shout out to, hey, like you said, you called me coach. A big shout out to Coach Primetime, Coach Deion Sanders. Come on, give the guy some respect. Call him coach. That's all he wants.
Very interesting comments from Deion Sanders. Not one of our topics, but maybe at the end of the show, we'll hear a little bit more from you, Brandon, about that whole situation. Not a huge deal, but why not talk about it? Deion's always fun to talk about. So yes, we're going to kick things off here with topic number one, and that's going to be the NBA Finals. Of course, the Milwaukee Bucks are the 2021 NBA champs. They defeated the Phoenix Suns last night in Game 6 of the NBA Finals. And Brandon, I actually wanted the Suns to win this NBA Finals, but it's hard not to like the Milwaukee Bucks. It's hard not to like their story, how the season unfolded for them. What did you think about the win last night for the Bucks?
Well, we both have to eat some crow here, unfortunately, because we both picked the Suns. And, hey, I'm the first to say that we were wrong. And hey, I mean, the Bucks got hot, and they stayed hot longer than the Suns. I've been saying it, the NBA playoffs are all about who gets hot and who stays hot. And I think Phoenix kind of burned up some of their momentum too early in the playoffs when they swept some teams. And, the Bucks were in some fights, and then now the Bucks got really hot late, and they just obviously went on a 4-game win streak and won the series here 4-2. So after Phoenix, held home court, Bucks kind of turned around and then just won 4 in a row. And if you go back to the show that we had done last week and even the week before, I kept saying this series will really begin when a team wins a game on the road, and that's exactly what the Bucks did. The Bucks went to Phoenix, won a tough game on the road there, and then how they kind of took control of the series. Then they went home and they finished the series off. So it really was that easy. And I think it surely shows that you have to continue to hold home court in the NBA playoffs. And I think that has been proven throughout history. But yeah, you got to give a shout out to the Bucks, and you got to give a shout out to Giannis. I think most people really weren't picking them to win. And then I don't know. I mean, I think, some people are having a tough call, even having Giannis be the superstar of this team, because everybody wanted it to be obviously the super team of the Nets or maybe the Lakers again. So I've heard a lot of comments really about Giannis, but I really want to give him props, honestly. I think he had an amazing series. I think he had an amazing playoffs. I do think he deserves the MVP. I do think Chris Middleton was really close to winning that finals MVP, in my opinion, because I think Chris Middleton was more clutch down the stretch, especially in moments when they really needed a bucket. They looked to Chris Middleton, or clutch free throws. Chris Middleton was the guy there. But speaking of free throws, talk about Giannis hitting his free throws last night in the clinching game. I believe he was 17 of 19 from the line. I mean, if he can do that consistently, he would be able to say he's really one of the best players in the NBA, and he is right now, but I still can think of 5 players that are better than him just off the top of my head. That's LeBron, Damian Lillard, Steph Curry. Man, I mean, who else were you going to say?
Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant. Yeah, Kevin Durant, James Harden. So, yeah, appreciate you for filling me in on that one. But, yeah, those are a couple of guys that are, all those guys are still better players than Giannis. And obviously they didn't win the title and Giannis did, but I still think those are better players than him. So if he can continue to hit his free throws, though, maybe he can put himself in that conversation. But I think he had himself a great playoffs. The Bucks deserve this championship. Obviously, their second title in franchise history. But I still think their first franchise team that won was probably better than this one with Oscar Robertson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think they probably could have beat this Bucks team of current. But, hey, that's a debate for later on. But I really want to give a shout out to, I think, Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, because I still think those are guys that are not getting enough credit here. Everybody obviously wants to talk about Giannis. Had the 2 40-point games and then dropped the 50-piece last night. But I think without Chris Middleton and his clutch buckets and without Drew Holiday and his amazing defense, and the guy had almost a triple-double last night, 12 points, 9 rebounds, and 11 assists. That's almost a quiet triple-double. I think without him playing defense on Devin Booker and Chris Paul at times, let's go back to those Game 4 and Game 5 late turnovers by Chris Paul and Devin Booker that, ended up losing those games for Phoenix. Drew Holiday had a huge hand in it, obviously threw that alley-oop to Giannis, got the and one. I think that was honestly the biggest play of the series there too. So, yeah, I got to give a big shout-out to those guys, but big shout-out to the Milwaukee Bucks for bringing that title home. And Giannis, you deserve it. You deserve all the credit you're getting right now.
Yeah, I think when you look at Giannis, even throughout this season, everybody's always said he needs to get an outside shot. He needs to be able to hit threes. He needs to be able to hit free throws. The free throws part I agree with. He doesn't necessarily need to be a good three-point shooter for him to be effective. And I think, sort of like a little bit in the Brooklyn series and then really in Game 2 of the NBA Finals, Giannis was just like, I'm just going to almost be a center, especially offensively, and just pick my spots in the post, drive to the basket. I still have a little bit of a mid-range jumper. And then when he hits his free throws, like you said, he can go to the rim and not be afraid to get fouled. We see that with Ben Simmons all the time. Ben Simmons needs to take a page out of Giannis Antetokounmpo's book and say, okay, I'm not a three-point shooter. We all know that. But I need to be able to go to the rim, get fouled, and go to the free throw line. And that's how Ben Simmons will be effective, just like Giannis is. He's a different kind of player. He's not as good as Giannis is, but he can sort of have a similar type of game, and he's a better ball handler, so he can kind of morph his game the way that Giannis is, almost more as a guard. But that's what Giannis did. He didn't have to shoot, 7, 8, 9 threes a game in order to be effective. So once he kind of figured that out, even though they lost Game 2, Giannis played really well in Game 2, kept them in it. And then you saw, Drew Holiday was so up and down offensively, at least scoring in this series, that Giannis had to carry the scoring. Chris Middleton's, kind of streaky, but he was actually pretty consistent throughout the NBA Finals. But you saw, especially in Game 5, the games were close, and you were like, who, like you said, which team was going to win on the other team's floor. And then you saw Middleton and Giannis in Game 5 do what they normally do. And then Drew Holiday had his best game of the finals on the road in Game 5 at Phoenix. And that flipped the series right there. As soon as they won Game 5, it was hard to see Phoenix even come back from that and even win Game 6, never mind win 2 in a row, despite the fact that Game 7 would have been at home. But, you think about Drew Holiday, too, is you mentioned, he locked up Chris Paul a lot. I think he gave Chris Paul a lot of fits. Chris Paul's not very big. He's stocky, but he's only 6 feet tall. Devin Booker, too, was so good in Game 4 and 5. I think he combined for 80-something points in those 2 games. But Drew Holiday was on him last night, and Devin Booker had a tough time. He probably had his worst game of the series in Game 6. So when you're counting on those 2 guards, then you have a DeAndre Ayton who's still learning how to play in the postseason, who's still finding confidence for himself. And you kind of saw the flaws in the Phoenix Suns against this much longer team in Milwaukee, especially on the perimeter. Because besides DeAndre Ayton, there's not a lot of size on this Suns team. Frank Kaminsky went in and actually had a few decent minutes for the Suns, but there's not a ton of size there. So you saw Giannis do what he wanted offensively. And just to see this Milwaukee team where, people were thinking Giannis might take off, as a free agent. and he stayed. He stayed with a team that drafted him. Chris Middleton's been there for a long time now. They trade a bunch of picks for Drew Holiday, who's always been on teams that have sort of struggled, but it's never been really his fault. Now he's on an NBA championship winning team, and it is a great story. Coach Bud was going to get fired after the second round series if Kevin Durant's foot isn't on the 3-point line. We might be saying something completely different, like who's Milwaukee's coach going to be next year. So just to see all those guys, kind of stick with it, stay in Milwaukee. It's a small market team, and win the NBA title was awesome to see. And I think this is good for the NBA because we've had so many star players kind of team up and go wherever they want, whether it's New York, LA, Miami, whatever. And now we're seeing a homegrown sort of team that made one good move to get a Drew Holiday in, and now you have a nice NBA championship team that you built over a long stretch of time, where it shows that there's two ways to build an NBA championship team.
Yeah, just quickly, 2 points there. DeAndre Ayton, I think a couple of times got out physical down low by Giannis, and then it neutralized him for the rest of the game. So I think that shows just how much growth, Ayton still has to go as a young player. If you get physical, it's time to get physical back. And I don't think that happened there. And I sent you and producer Ben a text where since Giannis came in the league, he's put on about 55 pounds. And so, man, he's really been in the weight room working and obviously eating right. And he threw his weight around last night. And we're talking about a power forward dominating a center at times. So I think DeAndre Ayton's got to get in the weight room a little bit and get a little bit more aggressive because, like I said, I think he got neutralized by Giannis really quickly. And then the other thing is, the super team. I love how Giannis talked about, hey, do you even need to have a super team? But I would even still argue that it might not be a super team, but a lot of times in the NBA, we talk about the big three, and they still had the big three, Giannis, Chris Middleton, and Drew Holiday. So if you have that big three in the NBA, I still think you can win an NBA title. So he may not think it's a super team, but it's darn close. So let's move on. Let's move on to topic number 2 tonight. And hey, man, if we're going to go on to topic number 2, and if it's going to be about this guy, then it's going to be Dame time. It's Dame time up in here. It's Dame time up in here. We love Dame Lillard. So, let's talk about Dame, man. And this was news that I hadn't even seen. Pat, cheers to you for sending it to me because it was big news when it came across my phone when you sent it. But Dame Lillard requesting a trade out of Portland. So what do you got?
Yeah, so apparently, Dame Lillard wants out of Portland. I didn't think this would happen. I thought he was going to stay with the Trail Blazers. He's got, I think, 3 years left on his deal, and then he has an option year in 2025 where he's due $48.7 million. So he's going to make 39 next year, 42 the year after, and 45 the year after that. So he's got a big contract. I always thought he got along with C.J. McCollum, although McCollum hasn't been healthy. And then same thing with Nurkic. Nurkic has been banged up the last couple of years too. So I think this is one of those situations where Dame Lillard's like, I've been here for a long time. I'm 31 years old, and I have to make a move or else I'm never going to get to a championship team because he's been in the league, 10 years or even more than 10 years now. So I think he's sort of growing impatient. On that end, I don't blame him. All these other players are kind of forming teams and whatnot. And then, but you do see Milwaukee, a homegrown small market team, win the NBA Finals. So you do wonder if Lillard's seeing what happened in Milwaukee, if that'll change his mind at all, or if he still wants to move on and go somewhere else. So if he does move on, there's a couple of places that folks have talked about as possible destinations for Dame Lillard who might be able to swing a trade. I think the team everybody keeps talking about, Ben Simmons to the Trailblazers, Dame Lillard to the Sixers. I think that would make the most sense. I would hate to see it. I don't like the Sixers as a Celtics fan. Not that the Celtics have had too much trouble with the Sixers in the playoffs recently, but I'd hate to see it because that would be a dynamic duo between Lillard and Joel Embiid. Heck of a point guard, big man matchup, a pick and roll matchup. That would be a nightmare. But that's a possible destination. Then the New York Knicks are also a possible destination. They have some picks. I'm not sure exactly what players would go back in the trade. I would imagine that Portland would ask for R.J. Barrett, maybe Isaiah Quickly, a few of the other guys on that Knicks team, along with a lot of picks. So it just depends on what they can get for Lillard. I'm sure that they're going to be looking for a boatload like any other superstar trade. So it seems like he wants out of there. I don't know if things will change over the next few weeks, especially when players, one thing that could happen too is a player could get hurt over playing in the Olympics. We saw it with Paul George, who snapped his leg when he was playing for FIBA, almost 10 years ago, I want to say now. So that could change things too, depending on where he could go after something like that happens. So, I don't think this will happen right away, but it is going to be interesting. Maybe although the draft is next week, and that could be a huge factor as to if the Trailblazers want to move on from him now and get picks to make in this year's draft. So we'll see what they do. They might even make a move next week if, in fact, they want to trade Lillard.
Yeah, I mean, this is big news. And, hey, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I called this, man. I called it when they lost after in the playoffs. He tweeted out, "What has my loyalty gotten me?" And immediately I saw through that, being like, he wants out, man. He wants to go to a team where he can try to win a championship. And producer Ben's bringing it up. One of the main locations that I think is going to try to happen is the Los Angeles Lakers. And the rumor has it that they're going to try to do a sign and trade with Dennis Schroeder to send Schroeder over, and maybe some draft picks, and maybe even Kyle Kuzma on the board as well. So you could see both of those guys go over. And to me, that trade makes sense. I think it makes sense for Portland as well. Maybe getting out of Dame Lillard's contract a little bit, to be honest, because Kuzma and Schroeder's contract combined probably won't even be close. And so they'll be getting out of a little contract. They'll get two young guys that they can either, develop over time or step away from over the next 2 years and clear some cap room themselves. So I think it does make sense for the Lakers to try to go in there. But obviously I want to try to see the Boston Celtics make a play for this guy. And I think almost every team, this is the type of player when he comes available and he comes out on the board and he's possibly trade bait, that every team is saying, hey, what can we put up to try to get this guy? Even if any kind of trade to try to get this guy on our team. Like, what is it? Young guys, like picks. What can we do? Who's tradable at this point? So if I'm the Boston Celtics, I'm talking about trading Marcus Smart, Taco Fall, and any draft pick you want going forward, because I want Dame Lillard on the Boston Celtics to have our big three with Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. I think that's a big three that could contest with any team, especially in the East, and probably any team in the NBA when you get Dame Lillard going on. I'm talking Dame Lillard is one of the top 5 best NBA players right now in the league. And I love this guy. And I make no shade of that and don't hide it at all. He's one of my favorite players. But I'm telling you, match him up against any other NBA player, and this guy has got the game. And he is clutch. In clutch moments, he is going to hit you a big shot. And I think Jason Tatum might be still too young to be in that clutch moment, might look to defer a little bit too much, which we have seen him do. And then I don't think Jaylen Brown is ready for that big shot either, but I'll tell you who is. Dame Lillard is ready for that big shot. Just give him the ball right now and let him play. So I think those are two teams that I think are going to try to make a play. But, you bring up Philly, and I think Philly's going to try. I think Philly's trying to trade Ben Simmons to anybody right now. So even if that trade doesn't happen, look for Ben Simmons to be on the trade block somewhere else right now. I think they realize that team is going nowhere with him on the roster, and they need to quickly abandon him so they can get somebody next to Joel Embiid so they can make a run for the title. But yeah, hey, hopefully it doesn't happen. I don't want to see them win anytime soon, but I would like to see the Boston Celtics get Damian Lillard. And if not, man, look how sweet that is, producer Ben. Look how sweet that is. So clearly I'm not the only one talking about it when producer Ben can pull up a graphic off the internet in just a matter of seconds. So, hey, make it happen. If I'm the Boston Celtics, like I said, and I've said this before, anybody is tradable on this roster, in my opinion, except for Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and I will even say Peyton Pritchard at this point. And Robert Williams. Those are 4 guys I wouldn't trade. Anybody else, ship them away. Any kind of draft pick you want for Dame Lillard. But Dame Lillard's going to be on the move. It's just going to be where he's playing next year.
Yeah, as far as the Celtics go, I think it'll be tough, man, because I don't think you're going to get him unless you do give up Jaylen Brown. And to me, giving up Jaylen Brown Dame Lillard's really good, and he's probably better than Jaylen Brown, especially offensively. He's definitely better than Jaylen Brown offensively. I don't know how much better that gets you, though, because then you're trading a star for a superstar, but then you still need that third star. So the only reason, if I was Celtics, to get Dame Lillard would be to keep Brown, keep Tatum, and have Dame Dollar on the Celtics as well. They traded their first-round pick to get rid of Kemba Walker. So I think the guys that you just mentioned, Peyton Pritchard and Robert Williams, you're going to have to put them in the deal. You have to put those guys in the deal in order to get Dame Lillard. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think that's enough. They don't necessarily have the picks. They don't necessarily have the young guys that they can trade there that, Portland's going to be falling over. So I don't think it would happen. I'd love to see it, the three of them together. That would be the next big three in Boston. I don't think it'll happen, but I also thought the Suns would win the NBA Finals. So they're a grain of salt, if you will. So there's going to be a lot of talk about this, going to be a lot of movement in the Dame Lillard sweepstakes over the next probably week leading up to the draft, like we just mentioned. Moving on to topic number 3, and the Olympics are coming up this weekend. Opening ceremonies, I believe, are on Friday night. But like everybody else, the Olympics, they're still dealing with the pandemic, and over in Tokyo, it's running rampant. It's not a good situation over in Japan right now, especially with the new variants of the pandemic of COVID-19. And there's a lot of players, even a lot of players from the U.S., who are either not going to compete in the Olympics or are out for a couple of weeks because they've contracted COVID-19, including Katie Lou Samuelson, who played for UConn for a long time, a female basketball player who's going to be in that 3-on-3 team, that new tournament that they're doing. And then also Coco Gauff had to pull out of the tennis side for the Olympics. Kara, I think it's Aker, who was a gymnast for the United States. She had to pull out because she contracted COVID-19. So there's a few more athletes that have been in COVID protocols that haven't necessarily tested positive. So we're going to keep dealing with this with the Olympics, especially with all this international travel that's going on. I think one mistake that the Olympics committee made was to not have like a 2-week space in between the athletes getting there and the game starting. Brandon, what do you think is going to happen over the next few weeks at the Olympics?
Yeah, I think that like 2-week quarantine period would have helped out, like you said, because it doesn't seem like they really have any kind of protocols when you first come into the country besides getting tested. And then if you have a positive test, then you're quarantined to the side in hotels that they have set up. But right now, man, honestly, I'm a huge fan of the Olympics. I love them. I was super excited for them last year. I'm super excited for them now if they do go on. But I think they're kind of, is a gray period. There's a gray area here now, and there's a cloud hanging over them right now, and it's going to be an asterisk next to them in history. I'm honestly thinking they need to be canceled. I really think they need to be canceled at this point, just within the COVID. I mean, you can call it a COVID bubble, but just within the Olympic bubble, they're calling it, where there's supposed to be, tight restrictions. There's already been 79 confirmed tests of athletes from not just the United States, from all other countries as well. So you have, a lot of people that are supposed to be within the restricted bubble that are already testing positive. And then outside that restricted bubble in Tokyo and in the country of Japan, COVID cases have been on the rise 155% over the last week. So I don't know, man. There's still obviously a global pandemic going on. We're still trying to fight it. And, Tokyo's having a hard time really getting it under control. And I really think it's probably a safe call to shut it down. And I know a lot of people don't like hearing that, especially when you got all the athletes over there, and they might not do it because of all the money that's involved. But I really would understand if they just said, hey, there's too many cases going around. All we're doing is spreading it. And, all these athletes are going to have to go back to their home countries and quarantine for another 2 or 3 weeks, even when they come back anyway. But it's just, I don't know. It just seems like I said, there's a cloud hanging over this Olympics right now. And I think it's going to be continuing, because I think there'll just be continued tests. The longer they have these games going on with the Olympics and the athletes there, you're going to see more tests. It's gone up over the week from 60 to 65 to now 79. And I guarantee you by the end of next week, it'll probably be over 100 with positive tests just within the COVID bubble. So to me, I think you shut it down. You try to bring it back maybe in 2022 or 2023. but you got to get this under control worldwide before we bring this back. And, sadly, this clip might not even get too much views because YouTube might even just kind of restrict even what we're trying to say about, COVID and the Olympics, because so many people don't like hearing it. But I just think, I don't know, man. I think it's kind of irresponsible right now. And I do think we need to shut it down and think about going forward in years to come. But another option I thought, which they could have done a lot earlier, to be honest, was say, and Tokyo was trying to do it. Tokyo was trying to boot the games and say, hey, man, give the games to somebody else and let us get the games a couple years down the line. And the IOC said, no, you have to have it now or you won't get them a couple years down the line. So then Tokyo said, fine, we'll go on. If they had said, okay, let's switch it to the United States. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, you're biased because you're from the United States. But guess what? We have the facilities already. We don't need to build any Olympic facilities. They're already here in Atlanta. They're already here in Los Angeles. All of our major cities are pretty much already set up to hold an Olympic game. And over short notice, guess what? The United States would be able to knock it out of the park. But it's too late for that now. So I just think they made too late of a call on switching to a country that is getting the pandemic under control a lot better than Tokyo. But hey, we love Japan. We love our Japanese fans. So I'm really hoping that their country can get the, COVID under control. And I just think for even the safety of Japanese citizens, I think the game should not go on.
Yeah, I mean, they've already eliminated fans from any of these events in the Olympics. They have to sort of follow the NBA bubble model and just keep everybody on site. Don't let them leave Olympic Village. And then the folks that are, working there as, working restaurants or cafeterias or things, they might have to stay there and not go home and stay in those spots in order to work those jobs. Because that's a lot of times what a lot of the folks did down in Orlando for the NBA bubble as well. A lot of the writers and NBA reporters and all the people in the media, they had to stay down there in quarantine before they were able to go out. And that's what I mean. Get down there, give it 2 weeks, and then quarantine. Now, I don't know if there was some kind of issue with, the NBA schedule and starting games and some of the other sports and starting games and things like that. And that's why they had to wait. But it seems like, for whatever reason, that they didn't want to do a 14-day quarantine, or at least a 10-day quarantine, and then have the opening ceremonies and then start the games. So, we'll see what happens, at this point in starting the Olympics. I think as far as shutting them down, I think at this point, the horse is kind of out of the barn. They're all down there. Pretty much everybody, I believe, is down there at this point. They're kind of, getting tested and doing their thing. And, and again, there's no fans, so I don't know how much you're actually giving, putting any of the Tokyo residents in danger at this point. But they got to stay in that bubble. The athletes can't leave, and that's the biggest thing that they have to make sure they kind of hunker down. And that's a lot of people. It's a lot different having, I think it was 26 maybe NBA teams down in Orlando than having to corral I don't know how many athletes from how many different countries at the Olympics. It's a bigger venture. I just hope they're prepared for it, because they have had time to do it since last year's games were canceled.
Yeah, I mean, it's really one of those things where it's such a tough call. I think it's such a tough call for, the IOC and even a tougher call for the host country of Japan, because they just don't really know what to do right now. And like you said, I don't know. I think, like you said, the horse is probably out of the barn. So they're going to have to mitigate this the best they can going forward. And we'll kind of try to see what they do. But yeah, I mean, tough call really going on, but we'll have to cover this going forward, because obviously the games will be going on for the next couple of weeks. So we'll talk about it certainly going forward on this show. But let's move on to an amazing topic. Certainly, I was going to wear my Mercedes gear, but too many people were going to be calling me biased on here.
I was at Lewis Hamilton, like the teal, black, silver. I was waiting for it, man.
I've got the Mercedes team shirt, man, but I'm telling you, too many people are going to be calling me biased. And I want to wait because, like I said, with the topics 4 and 5, there is going to be a lot of Max fans on here and a lot of other people trying to say I'm biased. So I decided to go with a neutral shirt for this topic. But this topic is a big one, and it's one that we certainly love Formula One and Lewis Hamilton winning the British Grand Prix after serving a 10-second penalty from his collision with Max Verstappen. But there was a lot of other things that happened in this race besides that collision, like Charles Leclerc leading 50 laps and coming in second place, or Yuki Tsunoda continuing his scoring streak for the young Japanese superstar.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda getting a top 10 finish, obviously not the top story at all, seeing what happened at the very beginning of the race and then the last couple of laps when Hamilton was able to pass Leclerc and end up winning at Silverstone. But Tsunoda getting a top 10 again, it's so people, you know more about F1 than I do, but just paying attention to F1 a lot lately and trying to learn more about the sport. If you're not in a souped up car, it is so hard to be on one of those super teams. It is so hard to get in that top 10, never mind getting that top 3. So
yep.
For Tsunoda to do that is just very impressive. He's had a great rookie year. He really has. And we mentioned before a few shows ago how much we think that guy could be one of the next superstars in F1 racing. So he showed it this past weekend at Silverstone. So definitely a guy to look out for. But like you mentioned, just an awesome race. I mean, you hate to see Verstappen, who's right now he's the best driver in F1 this year. He's having the best season. Not the best driver, but he's having the best season. We know Lewis Hamilton's the best driver. But,
yep.
You hate to see that type of accident. It looked like he got pretty banged up, too. He actually ended up going to the hospital.
Yep.
Says he's okay, so I would imagine he'll be at the next race 2 weekends from now. But, just an awesome race. Like you mentioned, Leclerc was leading by 50 laps, and Ferrari looked like they were going to win this major tournament. And then, of course, Lewis Hamilton comes right in from behind and wins the British Grand Prix again. And this means a lot to him. I mean, I've been listening to some stuff about this, and any British F1 racer, wants to win the British Grand Prix. I mean, they grow up on that track, and they go from being this youth driver for however long with this, only a few fans in the stands. Now all of a sudden there's 140,000 people at this thing, and you're
yep.
trying to win it on your home turf in your home country. So an awesome thing once again. I believe this is the 9th time that Hamilton has won the British Grand Prix. It's either 7 or 9. I know it's one of those odd numbers.
8.
It's 8. So I was off again. So he wins the 8th time at Silverstone. So just really cool to see Hamilton win that again. We thought that he was going to have sort of an off year, but then when you have the Verstappen crash and then Hamilton comes in first, I believe he's now just 8 points behind again in the standings. So as good as Verstappen has been, Lewis Hamilton's just right back there, and that pisses off Red Bull because they've been thinking the past few weeks, this is going to be our year. We're going to take it home this year, and then Hamilton's nipping at their heels once again. So just a great race overall, a great weekend for F1, despite the controversy.
It was an amazing weekend for F1, and, brought a lot of eyes to the sport, and a lot of people were watching, and then it had sold out attendance all 3 days. So I think throughout the weekend, the attendance was almost 500,000 people. So, I mean, there was a lot of people on Silverstone's tracks watching these guys battle it out throughout the weekend. And this was, remember, it was the sprint race weekend too. So not only were they, testing out the new qualifying format, you had, your regular qualifying on Friday, you had your sprint race qualifying on Saturday, then you had your full race on Sunday. So, man, there was a ton of action at Silverstone, and the fans were really appreciating it and loving it, and especially loving their British drivers, not only Lewis Hamilton, but Lando Norris and George Russell. Mr. Saturday put on a show actually on Friday in qualifying and really got himself up into the top 10. And then, obviously took himself a penalty and got knocked back to 12th for the sprint race or after the sprint race. So he had himself a rough weekend, George Russell, and Lando had himself a great weekend. Lando really, once again, putting that McLaren in racing form. But, man, I think the real story, obviously, is Lewis Hamilton winning. And, obviously, we're going to talk about it in the next segment. That crash was a big moment in the opening laps. But then, got a 10-second penalty. So no matter what your opinion is, he got a 10-second penalty, served the 10 seconds in the pits, and that put him out in, I believe, 4th or 5th place when he came back on track. Then Carlos Sainz had a slow pit stop, Immediately, Lewis went by him there. Then he went by a couple other guys on track. And then Mercedes made the key decision to swap cars between Bottas and Mercedes to let Lewis through to go attack Charles for the win. If Bottas doesn't do that, then Lewis doesn't have a chance to get unleashed per se and go forward to go attack Charles Leclerc. So big ups to Valtteri Bottas playing the team game for Mercedes and proving his worth yet again. Honestly, I think Valtteri had himself a great weekend and could have had a chance to win, but it was a split of strategies. They stopped him much earlier to cover Lando Norris. And when they did that, it pretty much took him out of the chance to go for the win later on when, Lewis Hamilton pit, I believe, about 7 laps later, maybe even a few more laps later than Bottas did. So he had fresher tires at the time. They made the quick decision. They swapped cars going into sector 3, and then Lewis was unleashed. And Charles Leclerc leading for 50 laps thinking, oh, man, Ferrari, this is our big moment. We're going to get our win at Silverstone. And then, oh, man, who's that in my rearview mirror? 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton on the charge after serving a 10-second penalty. And now he's attacking me. And I just think it was one of those things where Charles Leclerc was another one of those runners that pit a few laps earlier than Lewis Hamilton, and his tires fell off. And he really couldn't defend much at that point, and he knew it. And honestly, it was going into the same corner that the incident of Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton happened, Copse corner, and they both made it through clean. 2 cars made it through clean, but I also think Leclerc knew, hey, I don't have much tire left to battle here. I'm going to give him a little bit more space, and there's a little bit more respect there between those 2 drivers. So you got to see it. 2 cars went through there, and then before they got to Maggots and Beckett's, Hamilton was through, and then he goes on to win. So, I mean, what an exciting race. And like you said, Red Bull is certainly not happy. After winning 5 races in a row, 4 for Max Verstappen, 1 for Sergio Perez. They really thought, hey, we're in the driver's seat now, and they still are because they are still leading. But after this race, after the British Grand Prix, with the high finish of not only Lewis Hamilton, but Valtteri Bottas, the Constructors' Championship is now tight again. And then Lewis Hamilton has got himself right back in the fight for the Drivers' Championship going forward. Obviously, it's going to be a tight battle going forward between these two. Both of them have come out and had words about the accident and the incident. So I'm looking forward to an exciting race, certainly next when we go out to Hungary. But, man, I don't know. This British Grand Prix exciting. Really exciting. But if you go back to last year's 2020 Grand Prix, when Lewis Hamilton won on 3 tires at the British Grand Prix, I don't know which one's better, but the British GP is just always putting up amazing races, and Silverstone is just that amazing track.
Yeah, Mercedes is feeling good too, because there was all this talk about what's Lewis Hamilton going to do after this year. As far as his contract is concerned, is Mercedes punting on this year with the new rule changes? And then they sign Hamilton to an extension, and then they have something like this where he's actually able to come back and place first in the British Grand Prix, which we mentioned how much it means to him. Pretty good couple of weeks here for Mercedes, and they're showing that, hey, we're not punting on this season. We're right back in this thing. Hamilton's 8 points behind the top standings there behind Max Verstappen. So it's going to be interesting down the stretch, as always. The fight for the top spot in F1. Of course, what we all want to talk about is topic number 5, and that's going to be the crash between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. Happened very, very early in the race. We mentioned Verstappen got pretty banged up in the crash, Brandon. There's a debate as to was Lewis Hamilton driving, dangerously, recklessly, or was it just kind of like a racing incident and this just happens?
Well, first off, I want to say super happy to see Max Verstappen walk away from that crash because it was a really big shunt, a 51G stunt. I believe he hit those tires at 150 miles per hour. So it just proves how dangerous and yet exciting that F1 is every second and every moment of every race that could possibly happen. But yeah, that's the first thing that we got to say is that we are super happy that Max Verstappen is walking away from this crash healthy and unharmed and just a little shaken up. If you heard his team radio, and man, he did not sound good. There was a couple of gurgles and then an expletive, and that's all you heard. And it was quiet on the radio after that. So it was really good to see the team doctor, the F1 doctor get there and help him get out of the car. Obviously, he was moving around stiff, but it was super good and super happy to see him get out of that accident and walk away unharmed. Okay, so that's first thing that we want to say, because I don't want to be having any Max fans say anything poorly about that, because now I want to go on and say that Max Verstappen drives super aggressive all the time. That is the reason he's been so good in F1. It's got him to the point he is right now, where he is going to be a future champion of Formula One. But there's been so many moments in Formula One where these big shunts could have happened because of the moves that Max Verstappen makes. And I think this is just another one of them. And let's go back even earlier in the season at Imola. Max blocks Lewis Hamilton going into turn one in the rain. Lewis goes over the curbs, takes damage. That pretty much throws off his race. Let's go to this race into Brooklyn's corner. Verstappen dives in deep, almost takes off Lewis's front wing. Lewis has to let off the throttle so there's not an accident. Then guess what? 2 turns later into Copse, Hamilton and Verstappen. Once again, Lewis in the slipstream, gets alongside of him, almost gets pushed into the wall there, because there's a wall there for the old school pit straight. Almost gets pushed into the wall. He's getting ready to take the apex. And if you go on to Max Verstappen's onboard, Max just keeps on turning right, keeps on turning tight, and basically cutting off the corner. Okay, now I get it. Max might think Lewis is going to back out, because most times this season, Lewis has been forced to back out. Otherwise, there would be an accident. This time, Lewis is sick of that, man. And as a Lewis Hamilton fan, I'm sick of it too. He is done backing down. He did not back down. This was a 50-50 moment. He was right there. Guess what? Max Verstappen, you had the option to back out or go wide like Charles Leclerc did. You decided not to. You decided to turn in and make it tight. Your back tire gets clipped just barely, and you get sent into the wall. And I think this is one of those things when you push the limits like Max Verstappen does, and you keep pushing the limits, eventually it is going to bite you. And just like producer Ben has brought it up, he's got that car on full lock going right. And you can even see Lewis Hamilton's wing right there already next to his tire, man. So he sees it. He knows it. He's trying to force Lewis to back out. Not going to happen. 7-time F1 champion is now ready to fight you and battle for this championship going forward. And the message has been sent and well received by that big shunt. And hey, man, this is F1. Things will happen like this. Look at Romain Grosjean's crash last year. It's a dangerous sport. That's part of the reason why people like it. So let's go on to the opinions now in the paddock. I personally think this is a racing incident. Racing incident that should have had 0 penalty. No penalty called. So no matter what your opinion is, guess what? The stewards served a penalty. They gave Lewis Hamilton a 10-second penalty. He served that penalty, still went on to win the race. But man, I personally think this was a racing incident, a 50-50 moment that no penalty was deserved here at all. Let's go to some other guys in the paddock. Otmar Szafnauer, the lead, team principal for Aston Martin, live on the race that day says, I don't know if that isn't a racing incident, then I don't know what is. And hey, we want these guys to be able to race. So if we take that out or if we give a penalty there, then we're really discouraging these guys from racing going forward. Karun on the F1 paddock, another guy saying it's a racing incident. Okay. Charles Leclerc, a guy that had firsthand look at it. Charles Leclerc was right behind them in that battle, waiting for something to happen. Smart by you, Charles. Very smart to just wait for that moment to happen. I think we all saw it coming. So did Charles Leclerc. Charles Leclerc in his post-race interview also says, I believe that was a racing incident. Mika Häkkinen, All right, former F1 champion that had many, or I believe F1 champion, but former F1 great, had many battles with the likes of the former great champions of Michael Schumacher, also says, I believe that was a racing incident. Damon Hill, former F1 champion, British F1 champion, I believe that was a racing incident. So I'm telling you, man, this was a racing incident. No penalty should have been served, but a bullshit penalty was given, served. Lewis Hamilton still proves he is the best driver on the grid, no matter if he's in the best car right now, because Red Bull has the best car. There's no denying that. Lewis Hamilton is the best driver on the grid, still goes on to win. And Max Verstappen, message sent and well received. Going forward, it's now going to be a tight wheel-to-wheel battle. And in Hungary, nobody's going to be looking to give an edge at this point. So, hey, we're going to get to see a battle going through here to the end of the race and to the end of the season. But like I said, message sent and well received from Max Verstappen.
Yeah, I think the biggest name that you put out there as far as, who definitely thought it was a racing incident is Charles Leclerc, because he had the most to gain if, the tides turned and it was seen that Hamilton did something dangerous there, because Leclerc is the one that was leading for 50 laps and then Hamilton got by him for the first place finish. So Leclerc would have had the most to gain and try to make it a bigger controversy, but he said, I saw it and I didn't think it was anything other than a racing incident. So I just think that proved right there that that's what it was a racing incident. Red Bull and Mercedes are going at it. They're fighting tooth and nail for that top spot. They're going to be doing that all year. So this is typical like F1 politics. Yep. Red Bull's saying that it was dangerous. Mercedes is saying it was a racing incident. And then Mercedes, like you said, took the penalty, and still Lewis Hamilton still won the race. Not just because of what he was doing, but like you mentioned, Bottas was doing everything he could to help out Hamilton when they switched cars towards the end there. So their team accepted the penalty. And then, with the strategy that they had, and obviously they have an awesome car, and they were able to win at Silverstone. So I think it's pretty clear by the rest of the F1 community that it was a racing incident. And we want these guys to be aggressive out on the track. We don't want them to be dangerous like everybody talks about, but we want them to be aggressive. That's why racing is fun to watch. When guys are aggressive and they try to pass one another at certain, fun corners like Cops Corner, like you were just mentioning. That's one of the funnest corners that a lot of F1 racing fans love to watch throughout the year. So you want stuff like that to happen at Cops Corner, not necessarily Verstappen crashing, but guys trying to pass each other at that corner. So we don't want that to go away. And, calling it anything more than a racing incident would maybe, restrict some drivers and they would be a little more hesitant to make moves in a corner like that, if this were to be made into a bigger deal. So I agree with you. I think it was a racing incident, and, that's racing. That's what happens on the racetrack.
Yeah, just quickly before we move on, producer Ben, pull up those fan cams again, because those are some of the most exciting views of that crash that I've seen. And they're amazing to see, to be honest. But also, I'll quickly talk about what he's got pulled up right now is, the racist comments that Lewis Hamilton had to receive after the race and post-accident. People just wanted to go out and attack the man yet again. I mean, come on now. Once again, having to bring in race, religion, or creed into this is just disgusting, man. It was a racing incident. So that has nothing to do with it. So all you racists out there need to back off, man. But yeah, these cams are amazing. These views here. If you were trackside, boy, did you get a view of Max Verstappen coming in to those tire barriers. But like you said, I think many people have said it was a racing incident. And that's what I will still say to the end of time, because this debate will go on, I think, especially between Mercedes and Red Bull fans, whether or not this was a racing incident, whether or not the penalty was deserved, or whether there should have been even a bigger penalty. In my opinion, racing incident, there should have been no penalty. And just quickly, how Christian Horner came out and said, nobody passes into Cops Corner. Nobody does that. Well, just, in that same race, about 40 laps later, Lewis Hamilton passes Charles Leclerc into Cops Corner. Two cars go through there with the respect of two great drivers, not cutting each other off. And then other drivers came out against that comment and said, any corner is passable for a race car driver in the right moment. So you can't say that you can't pass there. So, but I don't know, big debate going to be going forward. We certainly think it was a racing incident, but beyond that, no matter what, we are super happy to see Max Verstappen walk away from that crash unharmed. Let's move on to the topic number 6, but I guess we're going to go to a 10-second break. So, hey, got to pay the bills here. So give us 10 seconds here and we'll regroup if you're sticking with us live here. We'll be right back.
It's time for Comeback Sports with Brandon, the Coach Perry, and Pat, the Shot Caller Flaherty. Here we go.
All right.
Thanks so much for hanging with us as we took a quick break there. And folks, before we get going again, make sure that if you are watching us on YouTube on this Comeback Sports program, make sure that you subscribe to Comeback Sports. You go to YouTube, subscribe to Comeback Sports, the channel, and then you will be fed all this content, all the different topics that we will be discussing, both our full shows and individual segments that our producer Ben Kudo does a fantastic job cutting up for us every single week. Also, you can follow Brandon and I on Twitter. You can take a look at our handles at the bottom of the screen. And finally, you can call in at that number at the bottom of the screen and ask us a question, bring up a sports topic, give your opinion during the show, or even leave a voicemail throughout the week. And we'll be sure to listen to it and answer it on the show as well. We're going to head back to topic number 6. Brandon was just finishing up his opinions on F1. Brandon is a massive F1 fan. He knows what he's talking about. So make sure you go back and listen to that F1 segment if you didn't hear it earlier. But Brandon, we got the British Open that just happened over the weekend, and I know you want to talk about topic number 6.
Yeah, I mean, while the British GP was going on, the British Open was going on too. So it was a big week for the Brits and in the UK with 2 big events going on. But Collin Morikawa, man, really putting down a statement here, winning the British Open and really doing it in fine fashion, to be honest. Played 4 great rounds and really controlled the game and controlled the course. I think we had talked about going into this how you really had to have accuracy off the tee, and that's exactly what he did. I think his tee to green numbers were amazing. He stayed out of trouble. He stayed out of the long stuff. He stayed out of those deep pot bunkers that we talked about. And then with a flat stick, he had an amazing 4 days with the flat stick, putting the ball. And I mean, even on 18 there, just a smooth putt to finish it. So I think Collin Morikawa, man, it wasn't a guy that we had picked, but a couple of guys we did pick were up there, like Louis Oosthuizen and Jordan Spieth. I shouldn't say we, I should say you, because my pick wasn't really around. But yeah, I mean, Collin Morikawa was a guy that kind of snuck under the radar here for most people. And this is now his 2nd major title. So I think he's really putting himself down and putting a foothold down that he is really one of the young guns out there on the PGA Tour and on the international golf game going forward. And I'm proud to say that he's an American golfer, man. So I was super happy to see an American win the British Open. Because, a lot of times the Brits will come over here and win the U.S. Open or somebody from the international game will win the U.S. Open. So it's good for the occasional American to go over there on the open courses, on those tough courses, in the tough weather and, in the birthplace of the game to be able to show that we can put ourselves up there with the best golfers in the world. And Collin Morikawa, man, puts himself up there and shows a statement. But I really want to say, cheers to Collin for having a great weekend and 4 great rounds and winning the British Open, man. He had himself a great weekend, and I'm sure he's enjoying it right now.
Yeah, if anybody watched the final round on Sunday, you saw that Morikawa was just locked in. I mean, he was hitting awesome shots, drilling putts, very accurate, like you mentioned. He joined he got on the PGA Tour in 2019 as a rookie. 2020, he wins the PGA Championship, and then this season he wins the British Open. And welcome another superstar to the PGA Tour. There are so many good young golfers on the PGA Tour now. It's scary. I mean, you think about, you just mentioned Jordan Spieth, who came in second in the British Open. We talked a lot about Koepka and DeChambeau and their little feud. That's great for golf. We still got Rory McIlroy, still got Dustin Johnson. Justin Thomas is an awesome golfer. I mean, there's so much depth to the top end of the PGA Tour that there's so many guys that have a chance now. We're almost not seeing that random golfer anymore come up and win a major. I mean, I know it's happened over the last few years, but it doesn't seem to be happening as frequently now that there's so much talent at the top. I mean, Louis Oosthuizen is really good, and then he actually led for the first 3 days of the tournament, and then just kind of couldn't hang on in round number 4. He couldn't keep up with Morikawa because Morikawa was so good down the stretch. But yeah, I mean, this kid's a superstar. He's going to be up there with Spieth and Thomas and Dustin Johnson and Koepka and DeChambeau, and those are just the good American young golfers. Never mind all the international guys, including John Rahm, McIlroy, and so forth. So add another guy to that list. Morikawa was just so impressive at the British Open. The weather actually held up. It wasn't as bad as it was. Everyone was predicting. There was supposed to be some rain that went through, but they had some beautiful weather there, including on Sunday, where it was actually, I believe, in the 80s at one point, which is kind of unheard of for England on the coast there. So it was just an awesome weekend of golf. I thought it was going to be an unbelievable finish, but Morikawa was so good down the stretch that it was almost a little anticlimactic. I thought, if Spieth could keep going, Morikawa needed to make a mistake on the back nine somewhere, and he just didn't do it. Spieth's biggest problem was, I believe it was on Saturday, where he bogeyed 17 and 18, and that put him in the position where he had to chase on Sunday. Not a bad position to be in, but he was kind of so far behind at one point that he needed a lot to happen in order to get back into it, especially needing Morikawa to make a mistake. And Morikawa didn't. He was so good down the stretch, and he was so consistent and fun to watch in the British Open. It was awesome.
Yeah, man. Like I said, cheers to Colin Morikawa. But quickly, two things, before I'll send it back to you, is you bring up the weather, and it was like that at the British Grand Prix too. It was in the mid 80s. So, mid 80s at the British Open, maybe Colin Morikawa felt like he was just playing at the West Coast swing, like he was playing in California, or like he was playing, on Florida again. Maybe it felt like he was playing at home, so it didn't have as much of an open feel, and he just played like he was at home and dominated. So that's a storyline that we might want to think about there. But also Louis Oosthuizen, man, top three finishes in the Open. Believe it or not, eventually he is going to crack that win, and I believe eventually he will be the Open champion.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned there about Morikawa maybe feeling a little bit more at home, he actually hadn't played at a links golf course before this year. The first time he played at a links golf course in a major tournament, or in a PGA tournament, so to speak, was the week before at the Scottish Open. He actually finished tied for 71st, so he just made the cut, didn't play great, but then learned how to play at a links golf course, and all of a sudden he tears it up in Sandwich, England. So interesting how quickly he was able to adapt to that type of course. It's very different. There's more wind, but like you mentioned, because of the weather, I think that really helped Morikawa, like you said. And I think that's a big storyline thinking about that run that he made. I would move on to topic number 7, and this was scary on Saturday night. Just outside of Nationals Park in D.C., there was a shooting, and it was just outside the ballpark. I don't know if folks have ever been there. I've been to that ballpark, and it's an area that they're trying to redevelop in D.C., but it's kind of not totally developed yet. And you could hear the shots from some of the game broadcast, some of the fan cameras, and fans were going crazy. Some of the fans went into the dugout to shelter in place, so to speak, Brandon. This was a crazy night over in D.C.
Yeah, I mean, so they thought it was an active shooter, and what really happened was there was an altercation outside between two parties, and it was almost like a drive-by shooting that happened outside the park. But because of the area and just the close proximity to the park, you could definitely hear the shots ringing out inside the park. So people thought it was an active shooter. So there was a little bit of panic that set in, and I don't blame them, especially in a country where, unfortunately, there has been so many of these incidents that happen. But people were really looking to scramble and save their loved ones, which I don't blame. I think that's the first thing that most of us would do, would be to, look to save yourself and look to save your friends and your loved ones and to scramble wherever you need to. And a lot of people, like you said, hey, jumped even on the field and looked to sprint into the dugout. And I think I would have done the same, and to throw a little bit of light on the situation, I think I would have tried to grab some gum when I was in there, because you know how they just have the serious stacks of gum in the dugout, man. I would have to grab some gum. And I know, don't take a shot. This is a serious topic, but I immediately thought if I was in the dugout, I would have had to been at least checking it out. But I think if I was so close to the field that, yeah, I would have been on the field trying to get to those places. And they said even the players at that point were saying for the fans to come onto the field and come into the dugout, because they realized the gravity of the situation and that it could be an active shooter. Nobody really knew what was going on. Luckily and thankfully, it was not, and it was not inside the park. It was outside. And so that brought the whole level down. And at one point, they came on the PA system saying, calm down, please calm down. The incident is outside of the park. And I think that was huge, because I do think it brought some calm over the situation and helped to calm down the situation, because I think everybody was really fired up. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them one bit. So, yeah, really scary situation when you think you're just going to go to the ball game to catch a game with your family and eat a dog, maybe drink a beer, and then potentially you find yourself in a situation like this. So I think they did the right thing with calling the game and evacuating the stadium so they could, get everybody safe and home to their families and make sure that they cleared out the stadium without any issues. There's no reason to play a game when we have potential loss of life outside the stadium and people getting hurt. So I think they made the right call with evacuating the stadium and postponing the game. And it also allowed the authorities to be able to do their job outside the park and investigate the shooting as well. So I think the Nationals did a great job, and I think the local DC authorities did a great job as well. But yeah, really scary situation.
Yeah, I think the scariest part of it, too, when you watch some of the fan cams and things, like you mentioned before, is there was a chance they thought there was an active shooter inside the stadium. So you've got fans looking around like, where do I go? So you don't – at that point, they didn't quite know where the shooting was taking place. So that's why they went in the dugout, like you said. That's why they went out into the field to try to just kind of shelter in place. And then when you hear that it was outside the stadium, you hear the PA announcer say, you're actually safe inside the stadium, don't leave. So it's just a chaotic, confusing situation for the fans, because you immediately think, if something crazy is happening, I need to leave the ballpark. But if you leave the ballpark, you're actually getting closer to the danger zone, which was where everything was happening outside the ballpark. I believe there were 3 people that got shot. One of them was a fan. I believe it was a woman fan at the Nationals game. I believe she's okay. I don't think there was any serious injuries from the whole shooting. I mean, anytime you get shot, it's serious, but I don't think it was anything too grave for a long-term injury. But yeah, I mean, I'm actually surprised that more people didn't either get hurt, get shot, that wasn't stampeded or anything like that. This could have been a lot worse. And like you mentioned, good job by the Nationals and the DC Metro Police, figuring all this out. But just a chaotic scene, that's I'm actually, I don't want to say I'm surprised it doesn't happen more, but a lot of these stadiums are either in sort of some of the tougher areas of some of these cities. Fenway's right in the middle of the Fenway neighborhood. And there's restaurants and stuff around, so it's a little different. But some of these other stadiums are in some of the rougher areas. And because that's just where there was land and they could build a stadium there. So I'm almost surprised this doesn't actually happen a little bit more often, where you do hear gun violence outside a stadium. But it was weird to see that. It was almost like a few couple decades ago when there was an earthquake during an Oakland A's game, and they were talking about it over the air, where something like that, unfolds on the air during a game. So, like we said, thank God nothing worse happened besides what happened outside of the ballpark.
Yes, scary situation, real scary situation there for everybody involved. And it's certainly a situation that hopefully we don't ever see again. But you never know, unfortunately, in 2021 and going forward. But let's move forward ourselves. Let's move on to topic number 8, a big topic, breaking news that really just coming out over the last few days with Cam Akers, the Los Angeles Rams running back out of Florida State University with the torn Achilles tendon, obviously ending his season prematurely. But yeah, man, this is going to be a long road to recovery for a great young running back.
Yeah, this is brutal. I mean, first you think about Cam Akers, who really burst onto the scene last year, especially later on in the season, had a nice end to his season. I know a lot of fantasy owners were looking for him as to not be a sleeper, because he was going to be a top 10 running back, I think, in fantasy, but a guy that was going to be a high-end running back that maybe not everybody was talking about. And then you look at the Rams too, where last season was a little bit of a letdown. I know they made the playoffs last year, but lost in the first round, if I remember correctly. Can't believe that was so long ago. I can't even think about when that was. But and then they gear up this year. They make the trade for Matt Stafford. They're loading up with Aaron Donald, and Robert Woods is getting a new contract. Cooper Kupp got a new contract. They're trying to load up. They're trying to go for the Super Bowl this season, and then their top running back tears his Achilles. And it's just like, they were putting so much stock into this year, probably next year, before a lot of these contracts either came up or they would have some serious salary cap issues. And then this happened. So certainly a blow to the Rams, certainly a blow to Cam Akers. It's going to be interesting to see, number one, do the Rams try to pick up another running back? They have Darrell Henderson, who's a really good back as well. They drafted a kid, I can't remember his name right now, in I think the mid-rounds of the draft. So they have some depth there, but they don't have anybody as good as Cam Akers. So do they go out and get somebody? Is somebody like Sony Michel with the Patriots somebody that could get traded to the Rams? There's things like that might be talked about over the next few weeks during training camp, which is coming up over the weekend, and then early next week when everybody gets going. That's going to be a topic of discussion going forward.
I saw you throwing out that question to Boston Sports Radio about Sony Michel getting traded. I thought that was a good one. I think I brought up a great point. Honestly, I think, hey, it's possibility. There is a possibility there, because I think we do have some movement. We have so many great backs that we could potentially think about moving on from one if it was the right deal. But for Cam Akers, I mean, this is a big hit, man, unfortunately, and a big hit for the Rams, because you got your star running back, your young star running back, probably the running back for the next, 6 to 8 years, you're hoping. And then he has a big injury like this. So two things personally. I'm a big Cam Akers fan, big Florida State Seminoles fan. So I got to see this kid play a lot. Got to even see his high school days. And boy, was he unstoppable. And he had a great showing at Florida State. So it did not shock me to see him get drafted so highly to the LA Rams. But I want to say this. I think the timing is good for Cam Akers. And I know people are like, timing, blowing out the Achilles. If he had stayed in college and this happened, in his junior or senior year at Florida State, then his draft stock would have just plummeted huge, and he wouldn't have been able to sign his big money contract that he's already signed being in the NFL. So the fact that this happened when he's already in the NFL, established, has his contract signed, that I think that's good timing for Cam Akers. And the second thing is he's young. He's young. I think he's going to be able to recover from this injury, be able to rehab it, and come back strong. If this happens later in your career, there's potential that you do not come back from this and that it is career ending. So I think the timing is right. Unfortunately that it happened at all, but luckily for Cam Akers that, he's already established, he signed an NFL contract, he's getting NFL checks, and, he's young, he's going to recover. The young body is resilient. He's going to fight back. He's got the right mentality. This kid is a beast. He's a dog. He's going to want to come back and show everybody what he can do. So I'm expecting to see him back, not up to obviously this year, but I'm expecting to see him come back maybe sometime next year, maybe, keep him out of preseason, I think even next year, and bring him back sometime in the beginning of the regular season next year. But as far as this year goes for the Los Angeles Rams, I think they're going to have to go ahead and make a move to get another back in the stable so they can go ahead. Like you said, they've loaded up with the trade to get Matthew Stafford, where they said they want to go ahead and try to win. Well, you're going to need a running back. You're going to need a run game. I know it's a pass-heavy league. You're still going to need a run game, especially if you want to try to have a balanced offense. So I'm expecting the Los Angeles Rams to go ahead and try to make a move to fill this backfield spot. It's just who are they going to get? And undoubtedly, I don't really think they're going to be able to get a back as good as Cam Akers.
Yeah, this move could happen mid-season too. You saw it with the Bucs last year when they traded for Leonard Fournette. And Leonard Fournette was huge for them in the playoffs because they had an injury to their starting running back. So, I think the Rams will make a move at some point. It just happens. It's just, who are they going to go after? What type of back are they going to go after? And when is that going to be? Is it going to be at the trade deadline or is it going to be before training camp? That'll be an interesting story to follow. Moving on to topic number 9, sticking with the NFL because training camp is coming up. Like we mentioned, Rodgers declines deal. Aaron Rodgers supposedly was offered an extension by the Green Bay Packers, which would have made him tied for the highest paid player in the NFL. So I think that means that he would have the same average annual salary as Pat Mahomes over the next 5 years, I believe, is what the contract would have been. So,
yep.
And Rodgers declines it. So this is a big move by Aaron Rodgers. He's clearly saying this isn't about the money. This isn't about my, securing my standing with the Packers. It's more about management and how he's frustrated with management, how he maybe doesn't like the way they're building the team. Maybe he doesn't like the way that they approached the draft over the last couple of years. That's what he's frustrated with. So this is a big move by Rodgers. We'll see what the Packers do. The Packers clearly want to keep him. They offered him that much money. They're saying it's not about the money. It's not about Jordan Love, coming up right behind you because we were just ready to give you a couple of years extension. So it's not about that either. So, they're trying to show Rodgers that they want him here, not just short term, but for the next at least 5 years. And Rodgers is saying no. So this is a big move by Aaron Rodgers. I'm leaning more towards he might move on from the Packers. I still think the Packers are going to do all they can to keep him, but This kind of gives me a little lean towards Rodgers taking off. What do you think, Brandon?
I think you're right. I think it makes you lean towards more of that. And, man, he's going to try to force a trade or he's going to be willing to even sit out a year, which would obviously be big news and historical in itself. But maybe he doesn't like Jordan Love still. And I've been saying that on here. But hear me out. And to kind of point where you said, he's got a 3-year deal locked in right now. The 2-year extension would have brought him to 5 years. But guess who's still on the roster hanging out behind me? Jordan Love. So I don't care if it's a 5-year deal. At any point in time, you could pull the plug on me and put Jordan Love in there. I'm telling you, he wants Jordan Love off this roster. And if I'm the Packers, I do it now. Jordan Love is not a game-breaking or game-changing quarterback. You could even go back to the draft. A lot of people even argue that he got drafted higher than he should have. So at this point, man, move on from the kid. That will really show that you're dedicated, committed to Aaron Rodgers, and give him that 2-year deal, a 5-year extension with no quarterback in the waiting. And I think that would change everything. I think this showed that right now. It's not about the money. It's about the roster. It's about having some say in who I play with. And I don't think the Packers have done that. And we've said this many a times on these shows that not every quarterback deserves that. You think Mac Jones is going to come into the Patriots, front office and be like, man, I want Randy Moss back on this squad. Like, no, he has no saying. He has no foot to stand on right now. But guys like Aaron Rodgers, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, they all should be able to have a say. They're the franchise quarterbacks. They're the face of the franchise going forward, arguably for the next decade. is what you would like. I mean, you know, with Aaron Rodgers, it'd be arguable that it'd be 5 years. But when you look at Tom Brady playing until he said about 45, Aaron Rodgers is a young buck compared to Tom Brady and still has plenty left in the tank. And he's proven that he has plenty left in that arm with the numbers he's put up over these last few years and being the league's MVP, man. You got the possibly, arguably, the greatest quarterback on your team right now. You know what I mean? You got to do everything you can to keep this guy and to make him happy. Start giving him more say, like really bring him in, sit down and say, what can we do to secure you for these next 5 years? And we'll do it no matter what it is. The ball should be in Aaron Rodgers' hand. He should be owning this franchise, in my opinion. All the control should be in his. And I know people are going to argue that and say he's a player. Guess what? He deserves it at this point. He's gotten this franchise to the point where they are, okay? He's arguably better than their best quarterback of all time, who's what? Brett Favre, right? I would dare to say this guy's far better than Brett Favre and has a far more sound mind than even Brett Favre with some of the stuff I've heard out of Brett Favre's mouth over the last 5 years. But, man, I'm telling you, this is the guy that you want to keep. If you let him sit out for a year or go to another team, you will regret it. Move on from Jordan Love. And I know you're going to say that's not the move. And I get it. I get it. He's a young quarterback. You draft him. You probably want to keep him. But my question to you is, what do they have to do to keep Aaron Rodgers and make him happy at this point?
Yeah, it's a question. If you move Jordan Love right now, how much value are you going to get in return? But if you keep Jordan Love, but you're still trying to keep Aaron Rodgers, how much value is Jordan Love going to gain? If you trade him right now, he's got more years left on his deal, and a team could bring him into camp and maybe see what they got with him. So you know what? You might be right. This might be the time to trade Jordan Love if you're really trying to lock up Aaron Rodgers. The question you have to ask is, if you do trade Jordan Love, is that the issue? You know, is that the thing that's going to keep him there? If it's not, you don't want to trade a guy who you at one point did think could be the future at the quarterback position in Green Bay. You know, you don't want to give that guy away. So
Agreed.
that's the Packers have to take the temperature in the room, and I wonder if the Green Bay franchise doesn't necessarily have an owner. They have a front office, and they have an administration, they have a staff that runs the organization, but it's technically owned by the city of the town of Green Bay.
Fans.
So it's the fans of Green Bay that actually own the Packers. And in a situation like this, with most other franchises, the owner would say, let's sit down, let's have dinner, let's do this, let's do that, and let's really talk about what's bothering you, and then we can figure this out. There's no owner in place with Green Bay. It's not like he's going to do a Zoom call with, a couple 100,000 Packer fans or something like that, and just that he can, explain what his frustrations are. So, there's not really that doesn't exist for Aaron Rodgers and for the Packers. So, it's got to be Rodgers, Flynn, the head coach, and then some of the front office, the general manager. They got to sit down and they got to hash this out and just figure out, Aaron, what do you want? We'll do our best to try to achieve what you want. I think we mentioned before, like the Packers might be waiting for some of these teams to cut some of their offensive weapons if they're overpriced because the salary cap wasn't as high as everybody thought it was going to be this year, and some teams might have cap casualties and so forth, and maybe that's when the Packers will pounce on another weapon or another defensive player or whatever. They got to figure out what Aaron wants. If there's no going back, then you might trade Aaron Rodgers. You might trade Aaron Rodgers and then say we have Jordan Love and then start over. I wouldn't do that. I do everything I can to trade Aaron Rodgers, but you got to figure it out from him what he wants and if any percentage of Aaron Rodgers is willing to stay in Green Bay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an option. That's like the nuclear option, like last chance thing. Like, you know what I mean? We don't want to have to do that, but if we have to, we might have to. But like quickly before we move on, what do you say? Me, you, and producer Ben will pool our money. We'll buy a couple of shares of the team on live trade here, and then we'll send them an email saying, just re-sign Aaron Rodgers, man. I'm part owner of this team now.
Right. Or we'll say, hey, Aaron Rodgers, come on Comeback Sports. We're a couple of shareholders of the Green Bay Packers, and you can tell us how you're feeling.
Yeah, I like that. I like that call, man. Hey, Possibly might have to look into it. Producer Ben, on your side screen there, pull up the stock price there, and we'll have to think about it. But while he's doing that, let's move on to topic number 10 and talk about the young guns in the NFL and who are going to be the young up-and-coming guns, or maybe that guy that had a great year last year and is going to do it again in the NFL. Is talking about young quarterbacks here.
Yeah, I know that there was a sort of a lack of and big influx of young quarterbacks in the NFL for a while. And then I know that class with Baker Mayfield and Josh Allen, it sort of hasn't totally worked out yet. They're still kind of learning, but that was sort of the first class in a long time that had the potential to have a really good crop of young quarterbacks. The last 2 years, you think about it, Joe Burrow, Tua, which people are kind of 50-50 on, Justin Herbert, Jalen Hurts last year, and then this year you got Trevor Lawrence, Wilson, Trey Lance, Fields, and Mac Jones. You've got a big influx of quarterback talent. Now, not every single quarterback in those two groups is going to be even not a starter over the next couple of years. Some of those guys might not be Pro Bowlers, and some of those guys might go on to win Super Bowls. We'll see what happens. But for me, out of the first and second year quarterbacks, if I was betting on one of these guys, I think I'm going to say Justin Herbert. I didn't even love Justin Herbert coming out of the draft. He wasn't that fiery quarterback. He played at Oregon, and it just seemed like Oregon quarterbacks just hadn't really worked out in the NFL before. But this kid has all the physical tools. He's pretty calm in the pocket. Sometimes the young rookies, they sort of get happy feet and they start to worry when things break down. He didn't seem to do that. He's got a cannon for an arm. There's still some pretty good weapons with the Chargers out in L.A. So I think Herbert's going to take a big leap this year, be a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, dare I even say a Pro Bowler for the L.A. Chargers this season. And we'll see how things go. They certainly need to ramp up their defense. Maybe they'll win a few more games. But Herbert's going to be really good. I think that's pretty evident now. I'd love to say Joe Burrow, but he's coming off a torn ACL, and he's playing in Cincinnati. They don't have enough protection for him. So, hopefully their draft picks will help out along the offensive line. But I think Herbert is the guy for me as the next young gun in the NFL that you can kind of tip your cap to.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Justin Herbert because that's my pick. Justin Herbert, and a quick behind him is Kyler Murray, a guy that you didn't bring up there. I think Kyler Murray. So I would say Justin Herbert, Kyler Murray, and Justin Fields. Those are going to be the three guys and the three young guns that I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do this season. And obviously Justin Herbert winning the Offensive Rookie of the Year, well-deserved, leading that Los Angeles Chargers team to a pretty decent season with a rookie quarterback under center. So I think he's got himself a great career coming up, and I think he's just scratching the surface of what he can do. But I think having a Pro Bowl wide receiver like Keenan Allen is always great to have. So I'm looking forward to seeing those two put up big numbers yet again this year, and even seeing Justin Herbert take even more of a step forward into being more of a star even. But then Kyler Murray, like I said, in Arizona, I think you got Kyler Murray, a guy that can do it with his arm and with his feet. I'd like to see him, honestly, get on the move a little bit more this year and show us what he can do with those feet, because he is lightning when he decides to take off. But that's another guy with another Pro Bowl wide receiver, this guy with DeAndre Hopkins. So that's another young gun that's going to have another big, great season with a great wide receiver. And then, like I said, Justin Fields, the rookie quarterback from the Chicago Bears. I want to see what this kid can do in that Chicago Bears offense with Matt Nagy. I think he's going to be looking to put up some big numbers even in his rookie year, and he might be the next Offensive Rookie of the Year. And then quickly, another guy I think is Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen took the big step this year and really developed into a great quarterback for the Buffalo Bills, obviously leading them into the playoffs. So I think that's another young quarterback that could take even more of a step forward. And then that's another young quarterback with another great Pro Bowl wide receiver, this time in Stephon Diggs. So those would be my four picks. But if I had to pick one that is going to stand out, I'm looking for Kyler Murray to have that big year to really take a step forward and really define himself as a starter in the league.
Yeah, Kyler Murray is a lot of fun to watch. I'm just hoping he holds up, because I really like watching him. He is a little guy. Sometimes when you're more compact, you can kind of take hits a little bit better. I'm interested to see Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence is going to get the most opportunity out of any of the rookie quarterbacks. I think he's going to play right away. So he's going to get a lot of chances. We'll see if he has the infrastructure around him with that new Jaguars front office / coaching situation with Urban Meyer, and then also the talent around him. Doesn't necessarily have that Pro Bowl player on the offense that you just mentioned with those other young quarterbacks. So that might be the tough part for Trevor Lawrence in his rookie season. So it'll be fun to watch all these guys this year and going forward. But like we mentioned before, I think there's a lot of quarterback talent coming into the NFL right now as we speak. But before we sign off here from Comeback Sports, Brandon, I know you mentioned Deion Sanders before. Deion was doing a press conference. I can't remember if it was at the league that Jackson State plays in. If they had like a conference media day, I think that's what it was. And a reporter called him Deion. He didn't like that, said, "You don't say Nick to Nick Saban." So what do you think on your final thought here tonight about Deion's response to that?
I'll try to be quick with it because I do get it. I see both sides of it, honestly. I see what Deion's saying. He's a coach now. He's a leader of young men. He deserves to be called that, and he deserves it because he asked to be called that. So this is just men to men or man to a man. When I ask you to call me by my name, my first name, or call me Coach Perry or Coach Brandon, and for him, Coach Primetime or Coach Deion Sanders, have some respect there, because clearly the reporter, even after he asked him to call him coach, retorted it being like, "I'll call you Deion again." And then he went on to call him Deion. First off, this guy looks like he needs a haircut and a shower. Okay. And so have some respect for Deion Sanders, who's looking dapper in his suit, and you look like a fool. All right. So I just think you should have respect for coaches, especially leading great programs. And he is turning that program around right now. And he's also a Pro Bowler, a Hall of Famer, one of the greatest players of all time. Have some respect for what he asked you to say. And then the other side of it is people say, he said about Nick Saban. People don't say Nick. And then there's been videos coming up about a lot of reporters saying, "Hey, Nick. Hey, Nick." Well, that's different. He's a different man. He's a different coach. And I would think he was saying what he was saying is, Nick Saban, a guy that has been around a long time, has earned the respect of everybody, right, in college football, is arguably the greatest football coach in all time in college football. He deserves some respect. You would want to call him Coach Saban. I just think that that's the kind of the respect he wants. Obviously, he's not on the level of Coach Saban yet, but he is a coach, and he deserves that respect.
Yeah, I think Deion Sanders wants to be called Coach or Coach Sanders or so forth, because he's now the coach of Jackson State. He's not the Deion Sanders football player, the Deion Sanders NFL personality anymore. He's the coach. So I think he's trying to get away from that and be addressed as coach, so that it's clear line in the sand that he's the head coach of Jackson State, and that's what he should be known for right now. This isn't a big deal. This is going to blow over in a couple days or whatever. Doesn't really matter. He's doing a great job down there, and I'm sure Jackson State's very happy to have him. So Deion Sanders, a very good head football coach so far. He's doing a great job. Folks, thank you so much for joining us this week on Comeback Sports. Once again, make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube, Comeback Sports channel. All the cut-ups that our fantastic producer Ben Kudo does will be fed to your YouTube channel, the Comeback Sports YouTube channel. That way you can just see them right away. You can just click on them real quick. You can also, you'll be fed the link to our live show every Wednesday. You don't have to go searching for it. It's just right there. So make sure you subscribe to us on Comeback Sports on YouTube. Also, make sure you follow us on Twitter. Our handles are at the bottom of the screen. And then, as always, if you want to call in, you want to leave a voicemail, you want to ask a question about our show, we'll give you your opinion. Make sure you call us at that number at the bottom of the screen as well. I am Pat the Shot Caller Flaherty, and I am, as always, joined by my co-host, Brandon the Coach Perry. Brandon, great to see you again, bud. Folks, we'll see you next time here at Comeback Sports.
Hit that subscribe, baby. We need it. Hit that subscribe button.
But